Hello, everybody. My name is Arnold. Welcome to the Cherry Hill Seminary podcast. Cherry Hill Seminary serves pagan and nature-based communities with high-quality education and empowers students to advance academically and lead spiritually. If you would like to learn about the degrees, certificates, and courses that we offer, please visit cherryhillseminary.org. That's cherryhillseminary.org. Our guest on the podcast today is AC Farmer, PhD, who is both a student and an instructor with Cherry Hill Seminary. And we will talk about both of those experiences in a few moments. To start, AC, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Let us know a little about where you're from, who you are, and how you identify within paganism.
Hi, Arnold. It's great to finally get to meet you. I am AC Farmer. I am professionally an academic coach at Auburn University. And so I do live here in the Deep South in Alabama, where I am also a Unitarian Universalist minister. I'm the assistant minister at First Universalist Church of Camp Hill. And of course, I am a pagan seminarian. I also teach ancient literature at Troy University. I do a lot of work at the intersection of religious freedom and community-based ministry, especially here in the Deep South, where religion and politics can tend to collide in some pretty intense and revealing ways. My academic work strives to take critical theory out of the ivory tower and use it to create a more just society, sometimes more successfully than others. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, which is a very different environment than I am in now. But yeah, I like to think that kind of adds up more of a breadth to my understanding of where people come from. I am a practicing heathen in a non-Asatru, anti-racist, anti-oppression tradition. And I was Hargidia for 5 years for a kindred here in Auburn, Alabama. Yeah, so I bring that experience to my UU ministry as well.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, it does sound like that would be a bit of a culture shock from Chicago to the Deep South. But
Well, it would be if I hadn't had kind of an intervening experience. My parents are both from North Alabama. I'm kind of in
mm,
South Central Alabama. Both of my parents were raised there. So I did get the benefit of spending every summer down here with extended family. So I would be in Chicago during the school year and in Muscle Shoals during the summers.
wow, great.
But the difference
Okay,
between Muscle
and
Shoals and Auburn is kind of like a chasm as well.
mm, so I had mentioned that you are both a student and an instructor of Cherry Hill. I'd like to first let's talk about your student experience. How did you even discover this place of ours called Cherry Hill? How did that relationship first start? What brought you to us?
I actually knew about Cherry Hill long before I was a student at Cherry Hill. It was when I was still earning my PhD at Auburn University. And I don't remember exactly how I learned about Cherry Hill, but I knew it more by reputation than anything that, it was a place that voices were more respected in the pagan community, and that people tended to kind of perk up if they heard that somebody was associated with Cherry Hill. And so it was after, wow, maybe 15 years later that oh no, soon after that I started teaching it at Cherry Hill. I kind of tend to forget that chapter of it. But yeah, I taught at Cherry Hill for a while. I taught a couple of insights courses first, and then I became a graduate student and I taught a graduate class on heathenry. And I am working on my thesis this summer and hope to graduate in January.
Right. So you are currently pursuing an MDiv, a Master of Divinity in theology and religious history. And
Right.
Cherry Hill Seminary offers three different Masters of Divinities or Masters of Divinity, excuse me. And can you tell us what that means to focus in on this topic or this area, this focus, this area of study that is theology and religious history? Because that's different than kind of the pastoral counseling degree that we offer.
It's more of an academic uh, degree than practical. I find that the other degrees are for those who are going into chaplaincy or other forms of ministry, leadership. And I kind of already do those things professionally um, and pro bono. So I wanted to focus on the more academic because that is kind of more my wheelhouse and where I find that I can apply myself most
Mm.
effectively. So that's why I opted to go with the theology and religious history specialism.
Great. Yeah, I think that's important for the audience to know that you don't have to become a minister or a chaplain if you want to study. You know, that's not a required trajectory to
Right.
study at Cherry
Though
Hill
Cherry Hill
Seminary.
does offer some wonderful specialisms if that is what you do want to do, especially the chaplaincy program.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great. And so, okay, so as a student of the MDiv in theology and religious history, one of the requirements is you have to author a thesis. Uh,
Yes.
can you tell us a bit about your focus for the thesis?
I would love to. My thesis that I'm working on currently, and just kind of feel like I'm up to my eyebrows, and especially this week with all of the um, opinions that were just published. To back up, my thesis addresses how SCOTUS decisions are reshaping religious freedom. So the Establishment Clause and the exercise clause, but it's not just about that exploration. It's kind of a tactical guide for resistance for pagan communities in particular. It attempts to offer a way to understand kind of where we're already vulnerable and how we might strategically become more visible through performative protest and even provoke the kinds of legal challenges that could, at least locally, set new precedents, kind of at a time when the court is being used to consolidate authoritarian Christian power. I want to at least explore some tools for what I refer to as sacred subversion. And
Mm,
so while the thesis itself is grounded in constitutional analysis, it's ultimately designed to be used for grassroots religious communities, especially pagans, who are increasingly targeted or even erased by judicial rhetoric. My hope is that I'll that and at some level, even if it's just a handful of people, become empowered in these communities to see themselves not just as protected under the law, but as active agents who can shape legal discourse through visibility, litigation, protest, like that. Because, as we've seen and may see in the weeks to come, right here as the session is ending, the First Amendment is kind of being hollowed out in real time by theocratic court decisions. And so, what I'm trying to do is not just document that erosion, but to kind of give people like a flashlight in one hand and a flare gun in the other, and
mm.
see how we can perform religion publicly in ways that are protected but also provocative, and how can we build community cases that push back if only symbolically. So yeah, that's the work.
Wow. Can there's a lot I want to ask you about that. Can you give an example of how perhaps most recently that sticks out in your mind? What is one example of that hollowing out of the First Amendment? if people have missed it, what should we not have missed?
Well, I mean, last session there was the very strange instance of the web designer who uh, was allowed to discriminate against fictitious customers because she was afraid that at some point she might be asked to support or to publish a web page that disagreed with her religious sensibilities. And, we come to find out that it was all kind of invented. So there was that case. And this year, there is I want to say, Mahmoud versus, I want to say, Ohio, where the families, again, based on some sort of supposition, nothing had happened to provoke this, that their children might be required to read material that, again, uh, went against their religious sensibilities. And like I said, these are kind of hypotheticals that are being brought before the court, and the court is then establishing new precedent and overthrowing past precedent in favor of religious ideologues in cases where no harm was done. So typically,
Mm.
the courts would not even hear these things, but not only are they hearing them and entertaining them, but they are ruling in favor of them almost preemptively.
Right.
And, as pagans, we've always kind of understood that, visibility is power. And so is, taking risk. And
Mm.
so I want to talk about how we can navigate that risk wisely, choosing when and where to show up, because these things have already been done. And so how do we push back against them legally and spiritually, and making showing up count?
Right.
Whether it's a piece of writing or a protest ritual or zoning dispute, um, so that we can be smart about the law without letting it silence us. And it is like important to know which opinions are coming down, and they may not seem like a very big deal. Everyone knows about the Dobbs decision, but people don't tend to pay attention to the other opinions that are coming out. And this is opinion season. And so between now and the end of the month, we will see, I think it's 37 more decisions come out, and many of them are religious based.
Mm.
So I
Yeah,
just
let's
encourage everyone to kind of pay a little bit more attention.
no, yeah, and let's dive into that. What, practically speaking, what are steps that interested pagans and advocates can take to respond to the pressures coming out of government?
Well, like I said, the very first thing you should know is the first thing you should do is know what's coming down, know what the decisions are. So even if you don't want to read the entire SCOTUS blog, which can be very dry at sometimes, especially when Justice Kagan speaks up, can be very entertaining. She is hilarious. Um, and so if that's not your cup of tea, there are a number of Substacks or podcasts that you can listen to that will kind of keep you apprised of what's happening in the courts, as the days go by, not just as far as religion is concerned, but bodily autonomy and gun access. And right now, there was one that was decided by the court this past week that has to do with discrimination in the workplace. And so these are very important things that every American just about has to at least think about. So I would encourage listeners to at least know what's happening, and then find little places within your small community. If you live in a big city, find a smaller community. You don't want to fight City Hall first right off the bat. Find a place where you can join in. Is there a parade happening that you feel does not have full religious uh, representation? how much visibility is your township allowing to the pagan community? And then, kind of start there. And we tend to see that kind of performative protest happen with more radical groups. Like what comes to mind is the kind of speculative protest that is typically done by the Temple of Satan.
Mm.
And they're very, very good at it, and they're very well organized. However, no one takes them seriously. I mean, they do, but even though people don't take them seriously, they get the work done. I would like to see them not be going it alone. I would like to see other minority religious groups kind of follow in that model of protest that makes a spectacle, and to do it so that there are more visible, more even considered to be more mainstream, less reactionary, to make it very normal for people to protest. And I don't mean like, in the streets protesting, just even if it's just through a letter or through a phone call to say, hey, why don't we have any, can my group join in here? Or why don't we have representation for that group? And then to push back when, when and if, because often it does, the town says, no, we don't agree with that because y'all are practicing witchcraft, or whatever it is they want to accuse us of. Yes, we are practicing witchcraft, but that's, that doesn't have anything to do with
Right.
including us in the parade, right? Um,
Right.
so yeah, I would like to see, I would like to empower smaller groups to feel that they have the authority to speak up for those sorts of things, and to really normalize it.
And so, just for the sake of understanding, the basis of all of the arguments and the protest is the Establishment Clause, correct? Can you give us a bit of
The
a
establishment
background on
clause
that?
as well as the free exercise clause, because the two kind of go hand in hand. While the government isn't allowed to kind of favor one religion over another, they can't tell you how to practice your religion either. And so that happens a lot with pagan religions. One case that comes to mind is involves animal sacrifice, and so and then there's another involving peyote use. And so if you have a legitimate religious practice that your small town wants to tell you, well, you can't have a bonfire on May 1st. If there is like not like a fire zone reason for it, then that's the kind of thing that I think we should be looking for providing pushback on.
And that word you mentioned probably pulls a lot of weight, the legitimacy. Who decides what is legitimate?
Right. And right now we're in a place where the Supreme Court has very openly said, because we're not a political branch, they consider themselves to be apolitical. Because we haven't been elected, it doesn't matter what the people think and want. The law
Hmm.
becomes what we decide. And they have very openly made comments like that. And it's not just, the outliers like Thomas and Scalia, but even Roberts has made those kinds of comments.
And thinking about that, how can pagans on the ground individually, how can we take steps to do you even think that we have to prove our legitimacy? That when people have a practice that goes against the mainstream, do they have to prove their legitimacy? And if so, how do they go about doing that?
I think that in a lot of pockets of America they do. In some pockets they don't. There are some places where there is a little bit more acceptance toward non-traditional religions and religious practices. But in I would say in larger swaths of America, paganism is kind of poo-pooed. It's kind of marginalized and dismissed. People can be very dismissive. There's that phrase that people use right now. It's just too woo-woo for me. But
Mm.
that's not all that we do. Everything that we do is not about, candles and crystals and whatever it is that, TikTok says that we do is we have legitimate spiritual and often social justice based practices and beliefs and theologies that shape the world around us and our interaction with it. And I feel like we as like a broader community, not necessarily we at Cherry Hill, because at Cherry Hill we're very much encouraged to investigate these things about ourselves and our practices. But I can attest to some of my pagan associates here in Alabama, some in the North. Like I said, I'm from Chicago, so I still maintain friendships there, um, who have just kind of internalized that dismissive attitude and say, okay, well, it's just kind of always been our tradition to keep ourselves secret, to keep everything under wraps. And then we kind of use that not as an excuse, but kind of as our knee jerk reaction. It's like, okay, well, we don't talk about it publicly. Well, but by not talking about it publicly is how you get erased, it's how you get silenced. It's how in an environment like this, you can lose your leverage, not just in social circles and in legal circles, but even kind of among your peers. I think that
Mm.
really thinking of ourselves as legitimate spiritual practitioners, and that our praxis are legitimate and deserve the same visibility and access as mainstream Abrahamic religions.
Yeah. And so, what other, I guess, advice do you have for individuals who want to learn more about the advocacy side, the protest side? I understand you teach moving into your teaching background with Cherry Hill Seminary. Can you tell us about the Insights course that you're teaching? And real quick, for the audience, an Insights course is a standalone 4-week course, non-credit. I call them personal enrichment courses. But Cherry Hill offers approximately 12 a year, approximately one every month. Can you tell us about the Insights course that you're teaching and what students might expect from that?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm teaching a 4-week course at Cherry Hill that brings these ideas into kind of community dialogue. So we'll be reading amicus briefs and decisions. There will be some secondary articles, but I really just kind of want to focus on what the text says itself so that people can really feel kind of the texture of how power works in the court. Um, so the class itself is kind of going to be focused on access and embodiment and strategic resistance. I want pagans and other minority faiths to see themselves as legal actors, like the legitimacy that I was talking about. So I want to ask, or I want the class to be able to answer, what does sacred protest look like, especially under authoritarian scrutiny like we have? Um, is there a way to intentionally generate cases or situations that can shift, uh, signaling both spiritually and legally that we exist and won't be erased? Yeah. So it's not just about analysis so much. It's kind of a roadmap for resistance. This class
And
itself.
right, and that class, actually, I believe with all the Insights courses, but it is a dialogue. There is back and forth. So people who are interested in the course, they will have the chance to engage with you and share ideas with one another. There
Absolutely.
is a
That is key. Yes, absolutely.
great.
There's not there's written discussions if you're not one who likes to speak up very much in class, and then there's also classroom dialogue It is not just me lecturing. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, wonderful. Um, I mean, I could listen to you all day, AC, but
Thank
for
you.
the sake of the class. um, and I don't want to give away too much. I really want to encourage listeners to attend the course. But you mentioned something. You said sacred protest.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever heard those words put together. Can you give us a real general overview of what that might mean or look like, sacred protest?
Sure. I mean, I think of it as kind of our sacred duty to um, create spaces where it is safe and um, very strategically trenchant to push back against um, a system that we didn't have a say in. Especially
And
in the
so the
cases of the Supreme Court, where they have made it very clear that it doesn't matter what Americans think, it matters what they decide. And so I feel like as pagans who are answerable to whichever gods we hold sacred, um, I cannot think of a pantheon that does not have a god of justice. So we owe it to our spiritual framework and to each other as a community to stand up whenever we can, whenever it's safe for us, whenever it's viable for us to do it. But we need the tools for it because pagans, by and large, are pretty disorganized.
mm,
Um, and that is something that we talk about a lot in Cherry Hill classes. We talk about, well, what is paganism? What does it mean to be pagan? What does this mean? And really coming to a consensus on all of that is really very difficult because we are not homogenous. We don't we can't all fit under one small umbrella. We have to have the big umbrella, paganism, right? And so that makes it really very difficult for us to decide, okay, so what are our values? I was in a class last term where uh, someone was advocating for pagans making uh, a kind of a value statement, like, so these
mm.
are our value statement, but because we are all so disparate, it's hard for there would be so much negotiation and it would be so watered down for us to be able to do that. So I understand that that is a difficulty in organizing. However, this is something that we all live under. We all live under, at least in America, we all live under the Supreme Court's decisions. And so, with that being our unifying point, I would love to see us be able to get a little bit more organized as far as uh, respecting each other's differences as individual pagans, but also supporting this similarity that we have with the threat of erasure and oppression under this regime.
Right. It almost sounds like um, we have to fix our own house before we expect everyone on the outside to give us the respect that we know we deserve, and that we are entitled to under the law.
Yes,
Uh,
and
it,
and that holds true for really so many things. I think you've hit the nail right on the head there.
um, what are some I guess how can we do that? How can we reach out to each other first within these communities? Because I have seen it, the
Mhm.
comment sections of certain websites, uh, pagans fighting back and forth, or maybe not fighting, but disagreeing loudly and forcefully. It almost seems, um, dare I say, impossible to extend the olive branch when the disagreement in our own community is so loud. Um, what do you have to say about that, or what can you recommend for?
I love I love
Learning?
that you said that. Yeah, a lot of times it's our differences that come out instead of our similarities. And that's why I want to focus so much on the court, because like I said, that is our common kind of our common bond, right? So we can disagree about all of this other stuff. So I can disagree with you about your theological structure or your practices, but that the fact that we both are held to whatever decision um, the Supreme Court makes about religion in America, I think that if we can unite on that, that is probably the first step. And I think that it is a very doable step because you can't argue with that. We're both going to be, um, kind of to, um, you know, held to those decisions.
Right.
And
Um,
and so I think that organizing under those pretenses is not the word I mean, but if we can unite under that banner, then
right.
nothing else. That the rest of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your theology is. It doesn't matter what your practices are, because we're fighting for this other thing that's bigger than us.
Right. Um, you had mentioned in our messages back and forth before today about your work with an organization called Across,
Yes,
and that probably is a good segue into this uh, coming together. Can you talk about Across, what that stands for, and your relationship to it?
absolutely. I would love to. I am so proud of their work. They were founded just a few years ago in 2023 in response to just an absolutely catastrophic hailstorm in the small community of Camp Hill, Alabama, and then a mass shooting that happened, and it made national news immediately following that in Dadeville, Alabama, which is the neighboring community. Um, and so the organization that emerged out of the recognition that the local small town rural systems, they weren't equipped to manage disaster recovery from the storm. Um, so the core mission became to co-create, right, um, a more thriving rural community with all of the townships there. Um, so they emphasize resilience and self-sufficiency, meaningful labor, and strong families. It's a multiracial community. Their philosophy is very class transcendent. From rural work, they also do work in like Ghana and Haiti. So where transformative change can happen when communities kind of organize across race and class lines. Um, Camp Hill itself has about a 30, I want to say 36% poverty rate, and has a lower employment and income than statewide averages. So what Across does is it provides food security uh, via weekly pantries and senior food boxes. They plan to expand to on-site feeding, so a food kitchen and nutrition skills workshops. And they provide homeowner support on kind of air property legal issues, lower interest rate loans, and of course the hailstorm repair. Um, they're they had a grant for repairing roofs, and it was rescinded by the Trump administration. And
Mm.
I would have to check with one of the guys I work with, Warren, to see what the standing is on that now. But they help homeowners make kind of energy efficient improvements in order to reduce their utility bills and improve air quality. And they are launching a tool library with DIY home and garden projects. I mean, and we are looking at putting in a community garden So a pollinator garden as well as a sustenance garden. The physical infrastructure is at the Oak Street Community Center and Resilience Hub, which is at First Universalist Church, where I am the assistant minister. And they host their community meetings, and that's where the pantries and offices are. They have a workforce development and creative center they're working on to provide access to tools and training. In the first year, volunteers helped to prepare over 7,000 meals. They rebuilt everything from decks and roofs and getting medical equipment like walkers and stuff to senior members of the community in order to help people be more self-sustaining. The organization's leadership, there's just wonderful people. There's local mechanics and just organizers and people who are good at writing and people who are good at talking to people and going off to other places that are facing the same kinds of environmental struggles and learning from those recoveries and bringing those answers kind of back home to Alabama. Yeah, it's all centered around a community so that families can kind of thrive with what's important is like dignity and autonomy too. I'm not as front and center with that group. So I'm not really kind of on the lines with the protests or the food pantry. I'm kind of more behind the scenes. I like to consider it infrastructural ministry. So I help to keep the container that allows others to pour themselves out into their justice work without burning out. And I consider that to be deeply sacred. And I see the gratitude that comes from the leaders of those groups when they are able to just, kind of put up their hands for just a second and let me take the lead.
And what does just real quick, what does across stand for? If people want to search it or Google it, maybe help it out.
Yeah, that is an acronym for Alabama Center for Rural Organizing and Systemic Solutions. And you can
Right. And so,
find them at www.acrossalabama.org.
very cool. And so to be clear, this is not a pagan organization. And kind of with what we were talking about a few minutes ago, how do you find your involvement with the organization? You had mentioned this is Alabama. I am just making the assumption that pagans are not the majority. So how do you find how do you find working with people from how has your paganism represented itself? Has that been a problem? Have you been surprised by anything?
Oh no, absolutely not. Like I said, it is very strongly connected. The community center is a building on the grounds of the Unitarian Universalist church, where I am the assistant minister. This is the First Universalist Church of Camp Hill, and so you can look that up as well. The minister Darcy Corbett and the president Warren Tidwell are the more front-facing people there. If anybody wants to reach out to them, they're amazing and will talk your ears off. And they are beautiful, wonderful people, and they are the ones that I am there to support. So they love me and I love them, and we all have the same values. And that's one of the things that's wonderful kind of about being a Unitarian Universalist. We're a pluralist um, tradition. So you can be Unitarian Universalist and a heathen, and they don't contradict each other because we're rooted in mutual aid and collective action. So it really, that aligns so beautifully with what my understanding is of my theology and my ministry as something that's co-created with the community and not done to them. So like, I don't really see ministry or my theology as kind of a pastoral role or just a spiritual labor that mediates between systems and souls. It's a practice of radical hospitality, which is making space, literally, spiritually, for survival and transformation to coexist. You have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so you can't really have self-actualization until you get to the top. And we don't really see it that way. We think that self-actualization is one of the more important things to do. It's the basis of human existence and interaction. We see the body is sacred, the land is sacred, and relationships are sacred. And my work with Across Alabama, as well as Unitarian Universalist Church and my heathenry, they all intersect in that way.
I have heard about universal Unitarianism a lot before, especially in pagan circles. I've never personally investigated it, um, only because perhaps this is something you've come up across in the past, but it can present itself as very church-like, and maybe that's by design, and maybe that's just a consequence of the efforts. I don't want to turn this into a commercial for Unitarian Universalism, but can you kind of tell someone like me who might be uneducated about the UU tradition, why do you think it plays such a big role in pagan conversations?
It's really great. Yeah, most of the pagans that I know are Unitarians, and most of the Unitarians I know are pagans.
Hmm.
So yeah, Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religious tradition that kind of emerged out of the Unitarianism and Universalism, which were separate religions before, and then they merged in the 60s. Um, Unitarianism focuses on the belief in one God. It rejects the Trinitarian nature, and Universalism emphasizes the belief that everyone is reconcilable with the divine. And so basically, we used to have 7 principles, but we have recently changed so that we have a different way of looking at what our value system is, that has love at the center. And basically, we really work toward inclusivity, and we have a commitment to social justice. We firmly believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice and compassion. And then the free and responsible search for truth is where most pagans can find their real home, though there is also a belief in the interconnected web of everything in the cosmos. So, that is our very pagan idea as well. But the free and responsible search for truth means that everyone can have their own way of coming to their spiritual or even non-spiritual belief system. There are even atheist Unitarian Universalists, humanists, Unitarian Universalists. Um, and so the practice of pluralism draws people who would otherwise not have that organized community. You said that it feels like a church, but yes, it does. And some people want to have that church community and organization without the um, without the baggage of
Mm.
shame and um, oppression that come from other less liberal religious traditions. And so I find that if there's, if you don't have, and that's not to say that there's not that it's only pagans that don't have communities. Pagans who do belong to their own pagan communities also find homes in Unitarian Universalist communities. There is an organization called the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, or CUPS for short, and it has a long list of very prominent pagans who have been leaders and members of that group. So if that's something you're interested in, that give that one a Google.
Yeah, wonderful. Um, so we've been talking for a while now. I suppose we can start wrapping up. Is there anything you'd like to say to someone who is considering an education with Cherry Hill Seminary, who might be looking for information on it? What can you recommend, or what words of advice do you have for those people?
So if you are considering Cherry Hill, I would say, yeah, come on out and try out a class. It is very academically rigorous. Um, so it's a master's, so it's grad school. I have learned so much from my classmates, not just in the class material, but just about um, things that don't cross my mind, just interacting with people from different walks of life and from different educational backgrounds and different religious backgrounds. It's really wonderful because by virtue of it being completely distance learning, not only do I get to meet people from across the country, but I get to have classmates in other countries. And so there are things that I take for granted as an American that they'll instantly question, like, what the heck is that? And it just never even occurs to me that that was something I should have questioned. And those are always good moments when you can learn from people around the world. And yeah, I would say, so come out, take a class, see if it's for you, and then meet with the admissions team and have a talk about, well, what do you hope to get out of it, so that you can decide what your major is. There's plenty of options, so many options.
Yeah, great. And is there anything else you'd like to share about perhaps any links or resources you want the audience to take away with them? What are some parting words with regard to the topics you covered?
Well, there's of course acrossalabama.org. And then there's, if you wanted to know more about Unitarian Universalism, you can go to uua.org. If you wanted to know more about the CUPS, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, there's a link to them under UUA. I'm sure you can go to cups.org. And yeah, I would say, just if you go to your favorite place to get podcasts, and go to Substack and go look for somebody who is putting the Supreme Court decisions into a language that is digestible for you, and start to keep up with what the decisions are that's coming down, especially during these last few weeks of this session.
Yeah, and if they're interested in the class, there is a link on your class, the Insights course
Oh,
with
yes.
Cherry Hill. There's a oh, don't worry, I didn't forget. There is
Yes, it's called Faith
uh,
on Trial.
Faith on Trial. Okay, and they can go to cherryhill.org. There is a tab for academics. Click on that, scroll down to Insights courses, and you'll see AC's offering for as long as it's being offered.
And that will
Um,
start the first Saturday in July. It is Saturdays in July at 9 a.m. Central.
okay, sounds good. Um, and I think that's everything I have, AC. Thank you so much for agreeing to the interview. Thank you so much for the information. Um, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Cherry Hill Seminary podcast. My guest today was AC Farmer, PhD. If you found this conversation to be of value, please consider making a donation to cherryhillseminary.org. And if you'd like to learn more about the academic offerings of Cherry Hill Seminary, please visit cherryhillseminary.org/academics.